Kraken don't always win the shootout, but when they do, it's against the Islanders. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R as the Seattle Kraken break the losing streak, getting their first win since the All-Star break. 2-1 in the shootout over the New York Islanders. And memes aside, the Kraken are now 2-8 in the last two seasons when going to the shootout. But those two wins are both this season against the Islanders. Strangely for the Kraken, the one season they were actually good in the shootout was, by process of elimination, the inaugural season where nothing else seemed to go well for them. Either way, with this shootout win, they pick up both very much needed points in the standings, and on a very good night to do it, as all three of the other teams in that Western wildcard race that we're playing tonight ended up losing. That being the Kings and Blues, who are currently in those wildcard spots, as the Kraken do now move from 6 points below both of those teams to just 4 points below them, still with both teams having at least a game in hand, or 3 in the case of the Kings. Meanwhile, the Predators also lost, so the Kraken get 2 points on them, getting to within 2 points of the Predators, another one of the teams they need to get above in order to get into a playoff spot. Though even with all that being said, and for how good of a night it was for the Kraken, not just getting the win, but with those other 3 teams losing in the standings, it wasn't just that the Kraken won this game, it was how they won it. Now sure, it does go to the shootout, so you'd like to win it in regulation and not have to worry about, well, the last couple minutes of the game, or having to go to a skills competition at the end of it. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter since it's a team from the East, and for the Kraken, they played a fantastic 60 minutes. Really, a 60 minutes that was worthy of the victory in regulation. It's just that Sorokin in net for the Islanders was absolutely fantastic and kept the Kraken off the board a couple of times that they probably should have extended the lead, or taken the lead back once the Islanders scored. I mean, honestly, the Kraken performance in this game had me wondering at points whether or not they had watched the last R&R. I mean, not actually, I'm pretty sure they don't, but they did do pretty much everything that I laid out that they needed to do to get back on track in that R&R. They were great on the forecheck for one of the first times in quite a while. They were good on the back check at limiting shots to the outside and not allowing very much into the middle of the ice in front of Grubauer, who, by the way, had a fantastic game for the Kraken, even in spite of all the worrying about how long it had been since his last start. He was great in net, picking up right where Daccord left off, and maybe even you could make an argument better than Daccord has been in the last couple of games, which is a pretty high bar that Daccord has set. Either way, Grubauer fantastic in net, only lets in the one, and it's really not one that he had a chance on. The Kraken played great defensively and great on the forecheck. I suppose the one thing they didn't really line up with what I laid out in that last R&R was the rush chances still weren't really there, at least in the quantity that we were used to seeing last season. They still did get a couple of them, and one of them they end up scoring on, but otherwise, it was a great game from the Kraken, and the biggest part of it was that it was a full 60-minute effort. There really weren't many times that the Islanders had any kind of momentum this game, at least at 5-on-5. The only time the Islanders really got things going was on the power play, and for what it's worth, although the Kraken do allow a power play goal for the Islanders in this game, the third straight game they've allowed a goal on the power play, they still, I thought, did a pretty good job on the penalty kill. Of course, part of that could be the rose-tinted glasses because they won the game, not to mention the fact that power play the Islanders scored on they never should have had in the first place, but we'll get to that. So then as we get into the game, with the Kraken lineup changes being, well, obviously Grubauer net instead of Daccord, but also Cartier back in the lineup instead of Yamamoto on the fourth line. And then we've got a little bit of a mix-up of lines with McCann moving back up to the top line with Beniers and Eberle, Burakovsky then taking his spot on the second line, and Tatar dropping to the fourth line with Cartier and Tanev. And pretty much from puck drop, it was clear that whether it was the changes to the lines or just wanting to make up for a couple of poor performances, not just coming out of the break, but before the break, this was very much a different Kraken team than we've seen since, well, pretty much the injuries to Beniers and Dunn that ended that 9-game winning streak. As offensively, they were clicking, getting right into the offensive end, all 4 lines, creating offensive zone pressure, getting shots off on net, and although they did allow the one rush chance back the other way early on, that was pretty much the only chance the Islanders would get until they ended up on the power play towards the back half of this first period. But before all that could happen, still early on in the period, the Kraken with that first line out on the ice, which had a couple of very good shifts to start things out, get into the offensive end. It's Beniers with the puck down in the corner, and he gets crunched into the boards hard with a big clean hit. It definitely wasn't anything dirty, but Beniers falls awkwardly, slams his shoulders and head into the corner of the boards as the puck gets away from him, and he was very, very slow to get up, which certainly was worrying, especially with how good that line looked early on. Eberle, it was nice to see, goes right up to, I think it was Pollock that lays the hit, and gets right in his face. It does on the replay look a little bit like they're line dancing rather than fighting or anything like that, and it's not like Eberle's about to drop gloves with pretty much anybody in the league, much less a big defenseman. Still, it was nice to see him showing that leadership to get right up in the face and let him know that while it was a clean hit, He's not just going to let that go unnoticed, especially with it being on Beniers, and Beniers already having missed some time with a big hit into the boards. Either way, it might have been a good thing that it took Beniers a little bit of time to get up, because eventually he does as the play gets down to the other end of the ice. The Islanders try to set up in the offensive end, but they're not able to, as Larson creates a turnover. McCann ends up with the puck in the Kraken end of the ice and immediately fires it down through the neutral zone to the far blue line, where Beniers is desperately trying to get to the Kraken bench to get a change and get a breather after being slammed into the boards. But with the puck on his stick, he just whips around back the other way, gets into the offensive end with a rush 2-on-1, Eberle on the far side, but he never needs Eberle as he fires off the shot. It goes off of the pad and into the net to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead, and Beniers his first goal in 8 games, and 7th of the season. I mean, what more could you want from a play, other than it would be nice to not see Beniers almost get injured with another big hit into the boards, and then Beniers, partially because he was so slow to get up and get to the bench, ends up getting the puck, and instead of just dumping it in and completing the change, he turns around, guts it out, gets up to that faceoff circle, and fires off the shot just before the Islanders' stick could get on his, and finds the back of the net. Not to mention, again, the great back-checking from especially Larson and McCann, as the Kraken were down a player at that end of the ice, with both Eberle and Beniers at the other end, and just one Islanders player with them. Still, Larson creates that turnover, McCann gets to it, gets the pass to Beniers. Beniers makes the decision to turn around, get that 2-on-1 opportunity, and makes the most of it. And actually, speaking of things coming together to make this goal happen, if Eberle had actually fought Pulock, which, again, that's not really something Eberle's going to do a whole lot, but if he had fought him, the play would have been whistled dead for the fight, and this play never would have happened. Meanwhile, had he not gotten in his face and tied him up, Beniers would not have been as wide open as he was on the blue line, or had the space he did to skate in with the puck and get the shot off. So it ends up being a perfect play from Eberle, even if it wasn't really intended to be that when he started. He's just going up to get in the guy's face and make sure that that's not all right. It just turns out to work out very well for the Kraken. Anyway, moving on to the rest of the game, the Kraken do maintain momentum out of this Beniers goal and nearly score a second time, as I want to say it was Vince Dunn that fires off a shot from one of the faceoff circles. It's saved, but the rebound ends up going off of the skate of, I think it was Horvat in front of the net, and almost goes into the far corner, and would have if it wasn't for an incredible full split save by Sorokin in net to get his toe to the far post to make that save, and then also comes up with the glove save on an Eberle rebound chance. And I think it was kind of that sequence that started to wake the Islanders up a little bit, as they do get another good chance down at the Kraken end of the ice, which Grubauer responds with a very good save of his own. And then not long after, the Islanders end up with a double minor 4 minutes on the power play, thanks to a high stick by Burakovsky, which his stick does get a bit lifted into the guy's face, but either way, it's his stick hitting the Islanders' face, so he ends up in the box for 4 minutes, and the Kraken mercifully managed to kill off the entire 4 minutes and get to the first intermission, still maintaining that 1-goal lead. So there you go, just the first period alone had pretty much everything we've been wanting from the Kraken and been missing here over the last stretch of 10 games. They have great forechecking to create lots of offensive zone pressure, get momentum at that end of the ice, still have good back-checking the other way to make sure the Islanders don't get many chances. Yeah, you don't really want to go to double minor and 4 minutes of straight power play for the other team too often, but the special teams there are, they do a good job of defending on the penalty kill to close out that period. And then as we get into the second, the Kraken once again get off to a good start, but it doesn't take the Islanders very long this time to turn things back the other way and get a couple of good chances to try to tie things up at the other end, including a wraparound chance that I'm pretty sure was here early on in the second, a wraparound chance that would have had Grubauer beat, but Will Borgen is there to save the day as he's at the top of the crease and just spins around, whips his stick one-handed at the post, and is able to get it on the puck, preventing what I think would have been a Horvat goal. Was the guy wrapping it around? It was either him or Barzell that's trying to wrap it around. Either way, Borgen comes up with the save here. I mean, ultimately it's a blocked shot. He doesn't actually get credit for a save, but Borgen saves the day, keeps the game 1-0 Kraken. Even though the Islanders do get a couple of good shifts here towards the start of the second, the Kraken respond to it with an incredible series of shifts back the other way. And I say series of shifts because the Kraken hold the Islanders end of the ice, the offensive end, for a full 3+ minutes, get 4 changes off, wholesale changes, forwards and defensemen, before the Islanders can even get the puck out of their end of the ice. And when they eventually do, it's an icing. They win the following faceoff though, then get it out and mercifully get a change with a couple of their defensemen, I think nearing 4 minutes in that single shift. The Kraken not able to score in that though, and we get to the rest of the second. And from there, the Kraken start to get some momentum through the middle of the period and continue to have that going for them right up until It's Gord that ends up taking a boarding call. It's a 2-minute penalty. And with this one, I gotta say, there was a lot of complaining, especially from Eddie Olczyk, but really the whole Kraken broadcast about this not being a good call. And they're right, it was not a very good call when you look at it on the replay. The Islander player, who it's escaping me who it was that Gord ends up hitting here, does see Gord coming and turns his back to Gord as Gord's coming in for the hit. Gord sees him turn his back and tries to kind of turn away from the hit, but his momentum is already going towards the boards, and wouldn't you know it, this is hockey where you're on knife shoes on ice, so that momentum carries him into the player in the boards. And it does in live action look a lot worse than it really was. And if I remember right, there wasn't necessarily a ref close to the play that would have seen it clearly, so I can see where the mistake would be made, but it's just not a good call. This isn't boarding. The guy turns his back to Gord. Gord tries to turn away from the hit, and while it does turn out to be another one of these awkward hits like the one Beniers took in the first period, it's just not a penalty. It's not a penalty the same way that that hit on Beniers wasn't a penalty. That one correctly not called. This one, though, is called. Gord goes to the box for the boarding, and on that power play, the Islanders end up scoring within, I think, like 30 seconds or something. Though, for what it's worth, the Kraken do get a very good chance to score shorthanded with a partial break for Tanev at the start of this power play for the Islanders. That ends up getting thwarted. I don't know if Tanev even gets it on net. He does get right up to the net. The puck ends up going down into the corner. Tanev was looking around for a call. I don't know if he got hooked or slashed. It was hard to really see anything that could have gotten called on the one replay they did show. Either way, the puck ends up going the other way, gets behind the Kraken net, and it's just a pass from below the net up into the top of the crease, and one touched through Grubauer into the net. For Grubauer's part, I think he played it about as well as he could. The puck just managed to find the one little gap there in the 5-hole as he was sliding back into the middle of the net for that pass coming out front. Ends up through him and into the net to tie the game at 1. And of course, it has to come on a questionable interference call on Gord. Again, one that with the speed of the game, you can understand where the mistake would be made, but at the same time, I can understand the indignation from the Kraken broadcast, considering earlier on in the first period, the officials missed a 7 guys on the ice moment from the Islanders, which should have been way more than enough to get the too many men on the ice call and give the Kraken a power play there. At this point, though, the Islanders have had 3 chances on the power play if you include the double minor as 2, and the Kraken have had none. That would change pretty quickly, though, as just seconds after the faceoff following the Islanders' power play goal, the Kraken, and Eberle in particular, behind the Islanders' net, ends up taking a stick to the face. The Kraken go to the power play, and while they do get some chances against the worst penalty kill in the NHL, they really aren't able to create anything particularly dangerous, and that ends up getting killed off. We get through the last couple minutes of the second, still with the Kraken getting the majority of the chances at the Islanders' end, but we maintain the 1-1 score into the third period. Now, although I did say this was a full 60-minute effort from the Kraken, the one period of this game, at 5-on-5 at least, that the Kraken maybe could have done a better job was at the start of this third, as the Islanders do start to get some momentum through the first couple minutes, but it doesn't take long for the Kraken to turn it around, and really they have momentum throughout the entire rest of this third period. Unfortunately, though, just like with that momentum they had in the second period, though this time a little bit more spread out through the entire rest of the third, they're just not able to create really any very dangerous chances. They do get 1 or 2 that Sorokin comes up with a couple more very nice saves on, and ultimately it's just not enough to beat Sorokin again, and we end up going to overtime. And in overtime, Grubauer does come up with a couple of pretty big saves on odd man chances for the Islanders, and thanks to those saves by Grubauer, as well as the Kraken really not getting much the other way, even with a power play they get towards the end of this overtime period, we end up going to the shootout. And then in the shootout, Grubauer makes the first 2 saves for the Kraken at that end of the ice. Meanwhile, Beniers does beat Sorokin with a nice move, but just can't quite finish with the backhand chance getting it on net. It ends up going just wide. Then the second skater for the Kraken is Tatar. He gets up to the net, does a quick little check and a little shimmy in front, beats Sorokin and puts it over the pad into the back of the net to give the Kraken the first goal of the shootout. And Grubauer makes the third save to win the game for the Kraken. The Kraken never even need to send a third guy out on the ice. They cleanly win this shootout in the normal 3 frames instead of having to go to, I think it was 8 or 9 chances in the first meeting between these teams. Eventually it was Yamamoto who had the difference maker in that one. He doesn't even play this game, but Tatar comes up huge, who wasn't a Kraken at that point in time. And the Kraken, again, get those 2 massively important points in the standings. So once again from this game, there's all sorts of things to like about how the Kraken played it. Yes, it does take the shootout, and obviously for all sorts of reasons, Kraken fans are not feeling particularly, we'll say, optimistic when the shootout rolls around. Although if it ever happens against the Islanders again, maybe that's the one time we will feel good about it. Still, the Kraken played the style of game that even if they had lost this in the shootout, which would have been disappointing, it's still a game that they played well enough start to finish, especially at 5-on-5 in regulation, that I think you can feel pretty good about where the Kraken are at, having turned a corner and starting to play better as a team, even if they're still not really getting the bounces offensively to get that little bit of extra finish that they need to actually score points and put it on the scoreboard. And again, even in this game, with everything the Kraken did do well, especially on the forecheck, it's not all bad luck. The Kraken did create some good chances, but definitely could have created a little bit more off the rush. Still, I think the lack of scoring in this game had a lot more to do with the goaltender in net for the Islanders. Sorokin had an incredible game for them. It just wasn't quite enough in the shootout. And for the Kraken, they will need to figure out how to beat some good goaltending, as up next they have the Boston Bruins, who have, well, last season's best tandem in the NHL, and still this season one of the best tandems of goaltenders, so it doesn't really matter who the Bruins trot out there on Thursday. It's going to be a tough test for the Kraken once again to get the puck in the net. No matter what happens on Thursday, though, we do get to feel good up until then that the Kraken finally had a good game, and hopefully it's something they can carry into another run of points or wins here through the next stretch, especially with some of the teams that they're fighting for in that wildcard race coming up when they come home. Well, actually, I guess just the one. They play the Wild in a couple of weeks. Either way, it's good to see the Kraken finally playing well. And with that, we can close out with the Kraken 3 stars. As always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide the Kraken 3 stars, you can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. With that, the obvious first star once again is in net for the Kraken, though this time it's Philipp Grubauer coming back playing his first game in a couple of months for the Kraken. And like we said, obviously a win the Kraken desperately needed, and he came up huge in this game. Sure, he didn't have to work nearly as hard as Decourt has had the last couple of games, at least when it comes to the number of shots on goal, but he still made a couple of fantastic saves in net. And I gotta say, it was a Philipp Grubauer that seems a little bit different than what we have seen in some of the games past. He just seemed a lot more calm in net than I'm used to seeing him play. For the most part, staying right in his crease, right on his spots, not drifting too far out or allowing too bad of rebounds. And again, was right there following the puck and seeing it very well all game long. And obviously, even though, like I already said, he didn't have to make quite the same quantity of saves as Decourt has had to, he still made 26 saves on 27 shots, so that is a pretty good night out. Up next with the second star, though, I've got to go with Matty Beniers. He had an incredible game for the Kraken, obviously gets them on the board first with that goal where he gets up, fights through an injury, makes the decision to not just dump in and go to the bench like I think just about anybody else in the world would have been tempted to. Heck, probably even he was tempted to in that moment. He goes right in, fires off that shot, and ends up scoring, well, admittedly, he said after the game, not feeling particularly well at that point in time. And even beyond that, he gutted it out the rest of the game and had a fantastic game for the Kraken, looking a lot more like the Beniers that we were used to seeing last season that we've seen in quite a while. And I think part of that was due to being on that familiar line with both McCann and Eberle. And then with the third star, you could go any number of ways. Borgen has the save as well as a pretty good game in his own right. Alexiak had his best game in quite a while. He's been going through a bit of a rough patch here. Again, both McCann and Dunn were two of the best skaters out on the ice for the Kraken. McCann gets the assist on the Beniers goal. Tatar has the game winner in the shootout. But ultimately, gotta go with Patreon. Brandon Tanev, I'm going to give the third star here too. He doesn't necessarily have the same impact, I would say, skating-wise as a lot of the other players did, but he did have a couple of very Brandon Tanev shifts. Just a buzzsaw out on the ice. He had one shift in particular that I can think of in, I think, the second period where he strips the puck not once, but twice on the back check in the same shift from Islanders players, and then turns it back the other way. He also was great on the penalty kill, had that shorthanded chance, which I don't think ended up on net, but still had that opportunity, and even aside from that, was an important part of that penalty kill, the double minor at the end of the first. With that said, though, let me know what you think down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be, especially who you would pick for this third star. Again, with any number of guys you could select. Riker Evans also had a very good game, among, again, plenty of others. So yeah, just let me know down in the comment section how we're feeling now about the Kraken after this game versus, well, certainly how we were feeling 24 hours ago after that game against the Devils. Until next time, though, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!